Greetings and salutations, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the third to last episode of the Infiltrator Fair Game Run. Mission 1 was moderately serious, and Mission 2 was complete shenanigans, but Mission 3 is strictly business. Basically, the Mad Leader is pissed off, and he's getting ready to nuke the entire fucking world. It falls upon Jimbo Baby, and ergo us, to go to the Mad Leader's compound, plant explosives on his individual launch consoles, and basically stop him from doing so.
You'll never stop me this time, McGibbets!
That one was for you, Mouse. Anyway, enough shenanigans, you know the drill by now. We take the helicopter to the enemy base, la-di-da-di-da. My finishing up this episode is actually going to mark something of an achievement for myself because this is the very first time I've made it to base 3 without triggering some kind of fight. Historically, my previous attempts have met with less than success. Accidentally shooting at someone, or failing to identify in time, or screwing up the controls at some critical juncture. This is the first time I've made it there without actually having to fight, or running into rogue pilots at all. As this is the second to last helicopter ride we have to make in this entire game, it behooves us to stop for a moment and think about what we've learned on our trips here so far. More to the point, it's also time for a little more Q&A, so let's get right on that. Question number 1, what happens when you run out of fuel or overheat? I got these quite a lot. If either your battery or oil overheats for long enough, you'll eventually suffer engine damage. Similar will also happen if you run out of fuel. Engine damage is basically a death sentence. When the engine is damaged, you basically lose the ability to have any real control over the helicopter. While strictly speaking, the game doesn't become impossible at this point, since if you were already in the process of doing so, it should be theoretically possible to at least land or try to. For the most part, if you do suffer engine damage, you're a dead man flying. You basically lose any meaningful control you may have had over the helicopter, and you'll quickly crash. It's actually funny because losing almost any function in this game will pretty much ensure that you die. If communications are damaged, you're not going to be able to access the radio screen, which of course prevents you from communicating with any other aircraft, and ensures that all encounters will result in combat. That obviously makes the mission way more difficult, not necessarily impossible. However, if you haven't set the ADF by the time the communication system is shot out, you're not going to be able to locate the destination, thus you'll never be able to get where you need to go. In that same vein, if your defense system's shot out, you're basically not going to be able to use either flares or chaff if that function gets damaged. So you can never avoid damage if an enemy fighter shoots at you. The mission isn't necessarily impossible at this point, it's just you absolutely have to shoot down any plane that shows up or you will lose additional functions. Losing the tactical map is no big deal, provided that you set the ADF already. Losing turbo is also no big deal. Makes it slightly easier to get to your destination in a timely fashion, but it's by no means essential. Finally, losing weapon systems mean you basically can't defend yourself. You can still protect your helicopter using flares and chaff, but it makes it borderline impossible to successfully land at the enemy base. Number 2. What are your defense systems, and what do they do? You start every mission off with 24 missiles, 36 flares, and 36 chaff grenades. Missiles are long-range and automatically track enemies, which makes them the best anti-fighter weapon, but you only carry a few of them. Flares will defend the helicopter against heat-seeking missiles, and chaff will defend it against radar-guided missiles. They're basically only needed if you get in a fight. 3. How is it you're able to identify the pilots so quickly? If their names start with B, C, D, E, or S, then they're probably working for the enemy. Now, there is a friendly pilot that has a name starting with C, and 2 friendly pilots with names starting with S. But with one exception, these are so obvious who they're working for just by their names alone. Compare Crusher with Chester and try to determine which one's the friendly pilot. Or Smiley with Slasher. The lone exception is the friendly pilot Scar. Scar has a name that sounds like an Overlord name, but he's a friendly pilot. Number 4. Will you ever be completing your flashback run? Eventually. I actually may redo that whole thing because there's a lot of information I got wrong about that. Especially with some of the stuff that came out about the, at the time, upcoming Flashback remake, and oh my god, that thing was awful. For one, I didn't know that it was going to be made by the same developers who made Amy, i.e. one of the worst games to ever grace the Xbox 360. But what actually really pisses me off about it is, it does a lot right. It borrows really heavy from the comic series, and there's a lot of stuff that fleshes out the story and background. Unfortunately, it's done by a team who is technologically incompetent. I ran into multiple game breaker bugs that basically locked the game down and made it impossible. When I'm having to restart a level around 6 or 7 times just because your scripting keeps fucking up, you have officially failed at programming. And that game is still being sold for $10 on Steam right now. Alright, I gotta calm down. We got a mission coming up, and it's gonna be the toughest one yet. Stay tuned for the second to last episode, where we hopefully will invade the base and save the world.